Welcome. I'm going to go ahead and get started here in a second, but I just wanted to say I did send an email probably about 2 minutes ago with a handout that we will be utilizing during the session today. So I more than encourage you to refresh your email, make sure you have that because we will be referencing that during the presentation. But without further ado, I know we only have, a short hour here today. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome. What is today? Tuesday, welcome. Thank you for joining us on your lunch break. This is a great session in our legal consideration series that will be presented by Janelle Payton, who was partnering with us here at Temple SBDC to put this together. If you are not familiar with the Temple SBDC, this is your first time receiving services from us. We are a nonprofit funded by the federal, state, and local government. We are hosted here at Temple University, and we're actually one of over 1,000 SBDCs in a nationally accredited network. There are 16 SBDCs in Pennsylvania, and since we're located here in Philadelphia, we focus on the Philadelphia region as well as Eastern Montgomery and Lower Bucks County. We offer a variety of services, namely we are known for our one-on-one consulting. So if after today's session you would like some additional steps with your business, you can sign up for one-on-one counseling with any of our advisors at absolutely no cost to you. We also have a variety of webinars, as most of you have probably seen on our website. It really runs the gamut from webinars such as today, which are about legal considerations. We have a ton on social media, marketing, digital marketing, food business series, restaurants, manufacturing series. So it really runs the gamut. And I highly encourage you to check out what else is available to you and keep a lookout for the rest of our legal considerations series. We'll be doing one of these every month. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and have Janelle introduce herself and take us away.
Hello, everyone. I am going to pull up my slides here. If I can have permission, that would be good.
Oh, give me 1 second. There we go. Sorry about that.
That's all right. All right. Can you see my slides?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So, you have to do the bio slide, right? But really there's 3 things to keep in mind, or 3 things that you should know about me. One is I've been doing this for about 20 years now. Won some awards, blogs got featured on different news places that you would recognize, ABC, Fox, things like that. So basically I've done this before, I've been around the block, and I know what I'm talking about. That's that piece of it. You should also know that I was a business owner before I was an attorney. So when I speak to small business owners and when I help my small business clients, I'm really helping them from a position of understanding where they're at. My first company was in millwork installation. And it was in Philly and Southern Jersey area mostly. And, our carpenters did amazing work and it was a lot of fun to work with them. So everything I do and everything I help my clients with really comes from a position of how can I help them in their small business. And sometimes I have to take my legal hat off and help them from more of a small business point of view and help them decide maybe what the best option is for them, given whatever they're dealing with at the moment. The third thing that you should know about me is my why. So why am I doing this? Why do I have a law firm? Why do I help small businesses? And the reason is that I feel very strongly that our nation and our nation's economy is founded on business and small business. And without a strong small business and medium-sized business community, I don't think our country would be what it is today. So if there's anything that I can do to help small business and to help that community, that's really where I want to spend my time. So I've created my company around helping small and medium-sized companies figure out the legal piece of what they're doing and trying to make it a little bit less tedious and a little bit more fun and a little bit more straightforward than maybe your larger law firms would treat people. So that's what you need to take away from this. But this program is called Pivoting in a Pandemic, right? So I tend to want to look at the positives and not the negatives. So we're crossing out pivoting in a pandemic, and we are going to think about our goal, which is business success. So pivot to business success. That's what we're going to focus on today. And obviously, we should probably start with the definition of pivot. Now, I recognize that we didn't talk about pivoting. We didn't hear much about it until this pandemic started. And then everything was about pivot, pivot, pivot. So you're almost hearing it more than anybody really needs to. But what is it really? It is just that we are changing a direction in your business or reinventing a part of the business. And the purpose is, generally speaking, to improve your revenue or to stand out in some way, which, you know, would hopefully end up in improving your revenue. But we don't really talk about the why and how it really happens on a much more regular basis than anyone talks about. We are small businesses, we are medium-sized businesses, and we can change direction. We can change our minds whenever we want. We don't have a lot of red tape or bureaucracy inside of our businesses. And that's why we operate in the space that we operate in for the most part. So what we're doing with that is we can make tweaks and changes along the way all the time. So whether or not we want to use pivot as a term, you know, it's the term of the times, but whether or not we really want to focus on that, we make changes, we make adjustments, we change as our clients change, as the economy changes, and we're really good at it. And that's one of the things I love about small and medium-sized businesses. We are really good at this. If we can figure it out, we can change on a dime. And that's how businesses explode. That's how growth happens. So I know pivot, you know, it's been said and it's kind of annoying to hear at this point in time, but really that's all it is it's the changes that you make on a daily basis. So what types of pivots are there? You know, there's changing platforms, there's focusing on a new audience or a new customer, employing new revenue models, using new technology. There's all different ways we can pivot. Sometimes it's a smaller decision, sometimes it's something larger, but really it's just a change. It's just a decision to make a change. So when do people pivot? When do businesses pivot? Oftentimes they've hit some sort of plateau in their development. The competition caught up, now they're swamped. They aren't different anymore. They are not receiving the responses that they want to their products or services, or, you know, some things have changed and now they aren't receiving the responses that they want. Or they're preparing to sell. In the negative, maybe they're not doing so well. And that's what brought about a lot of change in the pandemic. Was we couldn't operate in business the way that we used to. So we had to change to stay alive. But there's also a lot of businesses right now preparing to sell. And so part of that is, how can they make their business as valuable as possible before they sell? So they're even pivoting as they're, you know, preparing to leave the business or sell it. So moral of the story here is that pivoting is a natural form of evolution in pretty much every type of business. There's going to be some changes. There's going to be at least small pivots, if not large ones. So as much as we are going to use the word pivot, really, we're just talking about any kind of change or decision that you may make in your business, you know, to hopefully find a better outcome. So what I did was I broke pivot into an acronym, because that's fun, right? So we have 5 different areas of law that go with each of the letters of pivot. And we're going to go through these one by one. And Sarah said at the beginning of this meeting that we have a worksheet that went out to everyone. So what we're going to do is, that is a worksheet that's also going to follow what we're talking about today. So hopefully, I would love for you to leave this talk with some really quality, good information and a good understanding of what you can then take back to your business and back to your business attorney and have an intelligent conversation about some changes that you might need to make, or some things that you just might need to wrap your head around so that you can make the best decisions moving forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these 5. At the end of each, I'm going to take a little break and see if there's any questions. So feel free to throw your questions into the chat box or into the Q&A. I know Sarah's keeping an eye on those for us. So let's get started. P stands for presence, not the kind under the Christmas tree. Sorry, I had to say it. I'm thinking brand presence here. So I say intellectual property is often a business's most valuable asset. Let's think about that for a second. Intellectual property, intangible, stuff you can't touch. is often a business's most valuable asset. Many businesses don't even recognize that they have intangible property or intangible assets in their business. And the question I would pose to them and pose to any of you listening out there is, do you have a client list? If you have a client list, you have something worth protecting, and that is intellectual property right there. So pretty much every business in some form or another has some sort of intellectual property that they should protect, whether or not they protect it, with fancy patents that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, or keep it a secret is another question, but it's there, they have it. So the brand presence piece of this, there's actually two pieces. The P and the I we're both going to talk about intellectual property with those, but I kind of break it into two sections. There is the brand presence. So this is what you are portraying to your clients, to your potential partners, to your employees and your potential employees. This is what does your company look like? What do people think of when they hear your name, when they see your logo? So this is sort of the outward presence of your company and of your brand. The inward looking is what we're going to talk about under the I, and that is more the internal pieces of intellectual property that you might have. So first of all, what are we talking about? We're talking about your brand name. What is your name? How do people identify your widget versus somebody else's, or your sneaker versus somebody else's? It's your name. And then it's your logo and your taglines, and maybe your packaging. Maybe you have colors that are associated with you. Think of the Tiffany blue, that's trademarked. No one else is allowed to package jewelry in that pale teal color because that is Tiffany's color of blue. So what is it about your company that makes it different from everybody else's, that makes it stand out, that makes your clients and your customers go, oh, that's who I think they are. That's that brand that I know, or that's that brand that I use, and I know who they are. So why does this matter? When you pivot, when you change, sometimes you are changing your brand presence. Sometimes you're changing your products and your services. Sometimes you're adding a new product or service that might have a name. It might have a logo, it might have a tagline. It might be something new there. So I want to get you thinking about what might be new. What changes have you made, even in the last year? And pretty much every year you should think about this. Just give yourself some time to go, okay, what changes happened in the last year, and are things the same? Did I change my logo? Did I tweak that shade of green that I used to use? Did I change my name from, 3 words, and now I'm just going by the first word of the company name? So think about those things. Keep those, once a year or so, just think them through, unless you're planning a big strategic move. But think those through and go, okay, is there any changes here that I might need to take a look at? And identifying new intellectual property assets the business has developed or may develop during a pivot is critical to protecting the company's unique presence and brand in a competitive market. So if you did make a change, we want to make sure that that change is protected. If you changed your name, if you tweaked your logo, it might need to be refiled or re-registered as a new trademark. And right now, with everybody going much more national in scope and even global in scope with their brand names, it's very important that you know that you have the rights to your name. Because if you used to be a regional company, you used to work in Eastern PA, let's say, and now the internet, or now the pandemic, and everybody used to being on Zoom, now you can sell your services, for example, to people in California. Well, is there somebody doing business under a similar name as yours in California for the same goods and services? I don't know. But before you start marketing out there, you should know, because I would hate to see something happen where you're infringing on somebody else's name and somebody else's trademarks, and then you get a cease and desist letter. So that's why I want you thinking about these things. Securing your ownership rights and registering your trademarks, service marks, copyrights. Don't worry about those words. That's my job. But keep in mind that securing your ownership rights is what you need to defend your, who you are, what makes you different from competitors. So I tell people that we need to find the intellectual property in your business, and don't worry about what it's called. I will help with that. First, we have to pull it out. We have to see it, identify it. Then we can use a tool to protect it. And a trademark, a copyright, those are just tools. So don't worry about calling it by the right name. Those are all just tools that we have to use, and one might work better for you, one might work better for another person. They have different protections around them and also different costs to achieve them. So what you need specifically, that's a conversation that your attorney and you need to have together to figure out what is the best fit. But don't worry about that now. Just worry about what is it that you may have changed over the past year. So I'm going to ask you now to take a look at your worksheet. And you'll see that at the very top of that, we have P = presence, which is what we just talked about. And the question is, has anything changed regarding your brand, such as your brand name, logos, taglines, company colors, packaging, etc.? Make a note of it here. And this is a checklist for you. This is for you. You can use it again and again every year if you want, or anytime you make a big change in your company. But this is a great way to just like make some little notes to yourself. Then you've got it written down, you've got it in a place. And then as you bring it up with your accountant, your attorney, whoever is important to know this information, just check the little box. Trying to make it easy here. So before we move on to I want to check in with Sarah and see if we have any questions.
Hi, Janelle. Great. I'm loving this so far. Tons of great information. Definitely as a small business, I think a lot of people don't realize intellectual property can affect them too. So I'm loving this first P. We don't have any questions yet, but I do want to just let everyone know that I did put a copy of the worksheet in the chat. So if you didn't find it in your email, you can also download it using the chat here in Zoom. And if you have any other questions, you are more than welcome to reach out to me and I can make sure you get a hold of that. But I do encourage you to fill it out as we walk through this presentation with Janelle. And like I said, and Janelle said, please, 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 if you have questions, that's what we're here for, okay? So feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them as we finish each of the letters. Thanks.
So let's go on to I. The I is for innovation. And as I mentioned before, this is also a piece of your intellectual property. This is kind of, if you think about the brand presence as what you're showing to your clients, to the world, this is kind of what's behind the scenes, what's inside your company. Your employees will see this, but your customers might not have any idea about it. And we'll talk about that, but maybe they should. So these are innovative ideas that allow many businesses to surge ahead of the competition and succeed. So what do these look like? They're all internal. So a client list, like I mentioned before, that would be something that you would want to protect. You know, if one of your employees walked off with this client list, you'd want to make sure that they couldn't share it with anyone, that they couldn't use it. You don't want them to walk off with it to begin with. So there's ways to protect it. It might be certain products or services. Think about inventions. If you are in the products industry, you may have invented a new way to package something, a new kind of seal, a new kind of tape, anything really. Maybe it's a new snack. Maybe it's a new type of sauce that you're selling in a grocery store. Whatever it is, that is something that you've developed. So again, don't worry initially about whether it should be patented or trademarked or copyrighted. What we want to know is, did you create something that nobody else knows? And if so, what should we do to make sure it stays yours? So if it's a recipe, for example, let's keep it a trade secret, perhaps. Maybe the spice blend is only known by you, but the rest of the mix is known by all the employees and they know how to make it. So we keep a piece of it separate, a piece of it secret. Or maybe Kentucky Fried Chicken, for example, is rumored to make the spice blend in one factory and make the coating for the chicken blend in a different factory. And the employees are not allowed to get a job in the other factory ever. So if you work in one, you can never work in the other. So that's a way that they keep their ingredients, their ingredient lists and their recipe completely secret. The pieces may be known, but the whole thing is secret. You hear the same thing about Coca-Cola keeping the recipe, in a safe that only one person in the whole company even knows. So, and trade secrets, guess what they cost? They cost nothing. They cost some planning time and maybe a safe if you're going to lock it up, but they don't cost anything. So it doesn't, just because we're talking about intellectual property, you don't have to be seeing dollar signs here. Some of the other things could be business methods and procedures. I was on the phone with a client the other day and she said, just in passing, I have a new way that I'm calculating how I'm charging people and it seems to really be working. I had a lot of new clients come on. They love this. So we talked about it a little bit. Okay, well, it's an Excel spreadsheet with an algorithm that she came up with of how to price for the services that she offered. And that's something that she created and something nobody else in her industry is doing. So guess what? We need to password protect that Excel spreadsheet. Only the people actually submitting the quotes to the potential clients is going to be able to see that. But that's something inside of her business that you might not recognize, you might not think about because you're in it day to day as the business owner. But that's something that your business has figured out. That's something that is different than anybody else. So, and the other thing here is technology. And there's others, of course, as well. But you think about technology, you think about software. That's always new and always changing. And there are some different ways to protect software and apps and things like that. So keep all of those things in mind, whether it's internal, maybe it's a way for you to track your employees, your employee vacation time. Maybe it's just something you use internally that you've created. Or maybe it's something that, you use to serve your clients in some way or another. But these are all the things that kind of make your business work the way it works. So if there's anything that you can say, hey, that thing is something that I do that nobody else does. Well, let's make sure it's protected, first of all. And then the other side of that, and I do work with a lot of marketing companies, the other side of that is let people know that you have something that no one else has. Don't tell them what it is, but you're allowed to have a proprietary business method. You're allowed to have a proprietary procedure for doing something or a proprietary worksheet, whatever it might be. But as soon as you start talking about how you have these things that no one else has, guess what? The client trust in you or your customer trust in you goes through the roof. So if we can find these things and we can pull them out, then you can make money off of them. And that is honestly one of the things I do with my clients. We sit down sometimes and it's painless for them, for you as the business owner. It's just a conversation. But usually I can ask questions to pull out some things and understand what might be different about your business. And then suggest like, hey, have you ever thought about this? Or tell me a little bit more about that. And we end up discovering that there's intellectual property there that the business owner didn't even realize that they had. And then we can capitalize on that. Another thing we can do with it is we can license it, we can franchise it. So that's a whole nother realm that we can pull some of these things out and use them to your benefit. So I did talk a little bit about, you want to ask, is it protectable? And you want to think about other strategic considerations. So before I talked a little bit about how these are, we want to find the intellectual property pieces and then don't worry about the tools. And I say I have a toolbox of different things, and it does range from trade secrets to trademarks and copyrights to patents to franchising and licensing and things like that. So those are all tools, and those are all different ways that we can protect certain pieces of intellectual property. But what we do is once we find these pieces of intellectual property, we look at what is most valuable to your company and how can we protect it. And then we prioritize them. So we say, okay, well, this thing, is very valuable and it's not going to cost that much to protect. So let's go ahead and work that out. Maybe it's the client list thing. And we just need to make sure that the independent contractor agreements and the employee agreements that you have in place are strongly worded enough that they cannot walk away with your client list. Not a big deal. Maybe just a review of a couple contracts, maybe a few extra clauses thrown in, and we're good. All the way up to, oh, I invented this like new way to apply something to something else. And it's an invention, but it's also a business method for my manufacturing facility. Okay, that might be a patent. That might take a little bit longer. That might take a little bit more time, but let's talk about it and figure out where that falls in the priorities. So the moral of the story here is that seeking professional help to determine the best protection that fits both the company's needs and secures the idea will ensure that the legal components are completed correctly. And really, we just want to make sure that if you do go down this path of protecting what you've got, because you made a pivot, you invented something new, you tweaked something, you changed something, we just want to make sure that if you go ahead and work on protecting it, that protection will hold for you, and that you go into this process with eyes wide open so that you can understand what it is you're getting out of this, what is important to know. And, maybe there are pieces of intellectual property that aren't worth protecting because it's just too expensive or it's just not valuable enough to you. That's okay too. But let's make sure we know that that's our decision on those things, and we can focus on building up the others. So that's kind of the second side of the intellectual property piece of this. If you take a look at your worksheet, you'll see we have, the I for innovation. And I ask, has your company developed any new products, services, technologies, or business processes? And, if you have, write the notes in there. So same thing as before, we're just going to go through and kind of list out some things that maybe has changed for you over the past year. But at the same time, think about, oh, hey, I was thinking about, putting some effort into developing that other product. Well, as you do that, now you can be proactive about saying, okay, well, that product, it's going to need a name, it's going to need a logo, it's going to, be constructed in a new way. So we should be thinking about the intellectual property from the get-go and making sure that only those people that are involved in the process understand what it is we're doing, so that we can kind of keep things on the wraps until we know what to protect and what we can kind of let out of the bag. So I will pause there and see if we have any questions thus far.
Yeah, we actually do, which is great, Janelle. So someone's asking, what's the investment to register your business name and logo?
So typical attorney answer, right? It depends. Registering your business, that depends on what type of entity you're going to form. So if you do something like a limited liability company, in most states, that's not very expensive. But if you want to offer stock and form a corporation, that is going to cost a little bit more to register, but also to get all of the bylaws and all the corporate documents together for something like that. So that's one piece of it. And then trademarking, that piece, it also, I hate saying it depends, but it also kind of depends on, are you trademarking a name that is probably not in use and probably can be pushed through the system, not pushed, but can get through the system very quickly? Or is it something that, is kind of similar to some other things, so it might need a little bit of massaging? And then are there logos associated with it? Are there taglines associated with it? So that scope just can increase a little bit. So it sort of depends on what you're looking to do and what type of entity and how large a scope of trademarking you need. But yeah, I'd like to give you a better answer, but I'm sorry. We can chat offline.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I totally agree. We are in a legal considerations webinar, right? And as everyone here knows, like Janelle said, it's always going to be an it depends, especially since when we deal with small businesses, we're dealing with people who are solopreneurs. We're dealing with, people who have 10 employees, people who have 100 employees. Mm-hmm. And depending on what stage you're at, it's obviously going to change, any of your legal considerations throughout the process. But like I said, you're going to have Janelle's information, and you're more than welcome to reach out to the Temple SBDC. I'm going to put our email in the chat right now for those of you that don't have it already. And we can always set you up with a consultant, and we can speak specifically on your business as well in the future. And I think we're good to keep going, Janelle.
Okay, sounds good. So next is V. V is ventures. So here we're thinking about joint ventures and partnerships. Negotiating, creating new deals with potential joint venture partners can open businesses to entirely new lucrative audiences. So here we're talking about things like co-marketing arrangements, maybe bundling products and services with other clients or other companies, co-producing those products and services, or just new ventures overall. I've noticed that within the past year, there's been a lot of business owners that I've known come together to form completely new partnerships in sort of similar industries, but maybe not even exactly the same. So this V sort of covers anything from starting from scratch, starting something new with someone, all the way to, hey, I am a business. Like, for example, I had a client who, I don't want to give out too much information, but they joined with another company. Similar, I know what I'll say. They did something along the lines of grass seed. They coupled with a company that did something on the lines of fertilizer for grass. So they decided to produce a product together that included both. They packaged it, both names were on there, they marketed it, it went out. So it's things like that. It's these creative arrangements that happen when business owners get together, or you start to notice that, oh, my product sells better. My salty chips sell much better when they're sitting next to a bottle of water than when they're sitting next to chocolate cookies. Maybe you co-market, maybe you go in together with the water company and say, okay, here, buy a bottle of water, get a bag of chips for half price or something. I don't know what it is, but you get the idea. There's so many opportunities out there to work with other businesses and other companies in different ways. And sometimes they are very just loose and like, hey, let's do a sale together. And there's not really anything to back up how the proceeds get split out or things like that. But in a lot of situations, especially in service businesses, all of that needs to be spelled out ahead of time so that we know, okay, if we sell, a coaching service along with, or an individual coaching service along with a program, then, I get this % of the proceeds and you get this % of the proceeds, and we cross market to our different lists and whatever things go on like that. So there's a lot of creative things going on in that world. And think about, you see people have, and I'm missing the word for it right now, but influencers will promote other people's products. Well, they're not doing that for free. They're doing that because they're getting paid for it, or they're getting some sort of revenue on the back end. If they sell so many, they get so many dollars. So, or somebody comes through their link, they get credit for that. So there's a lot of things going on in the world right now that are, how can we work together, not combine our companies? This is a project, or this is just one product that we're testing together. Or maybe it's a product that, I'm tweaking the design a little bit, but I think your manufacturing company might be able to produce it in a different way. So I'm going to work with you on that. So this is really thinking a little bit bigger, thinking creatively, thinking collaboratively with people that and people around you, people in your industry, even competitors I see come together on things sometimes. One might have, some little thing that they do better than everybody else. So go to them and say, hey, you do that better than everybody else. If I can sell this with your that, maybe we'll both make more money. Let's try it. Okay. That's awesome. That's great. So these are happening a lot. And I think this is the part of business that I really like, because we're not fighting with each other. We're trying to figure out how we can all make some more money together, and how everybody can come together and get what they need out of these arrangements. So there are many benefits of starting joint ventures like this, but it's important to start with a legal agreement that clearly spells out the duties of each partner, as well as terms identifying the details of how profits and losses will be divided, contributions of each party, and exit strategies. And as much as I see these arrangements start to come together, and I love seeing them, if there isn't that language in place, if there isn't a formal agreement in place, eventually these end. These arrangements and agreements oftentimes have an end date because it's a promotional thing, or because it's a co-marketing thing. It only goes on for so long. Some of them last longer, absolutely, but a lot of them have an end date. But how do we split things up when it is an end date? And we just want to make sure, if you're using my brand name on your product, I want to have the rights back to my brand name, even though I gave them to you to print on that package. So there's a lot of pieces that need to get worked out, just so at the end of this, everyone can go their separate ways and make sure that everyone is happy with what happened and everyone thinks it's fair, so that, maybe next month we'll come up with something new and they can work together again. But what happens, unfortunately, when people don't have the terms spelled out together, is someone has a different expectation and they end up arguing about what that expectation was, or should have been, or shoulda, coulda, woulda, all that stuff. So what we do, what my job really is to pull out what is it that the two companies, or two people, or a company and people, whatever the arrangement might be, what is it that they're trying to accomplish? And how can I make sure that they're both on the same page, that we get it all in writing, and that when it's time to end because someone sold their business, or this is just the end date, or something goes wrong, or it didn't work, how do we get out in a graceful manner, making sure that everybody has what they need? So if you take a look at your worksheet and the V is ventures, are you considering a joint venture, co-marketing, or producing new or current products with a strategic partner? If so, note that here. And then I'll see if we have any questions.
Looks like we are good for now, Janelle.
All right, great. I don't like that I'm doing all the talking here. All right, so the O stands for others, and think of this as others in your team or others in your network, others around you. Nurturing current relationships can create opportunities for competitive pricing, reduced overhead costs, and long-term quality and stability. So what are we really talking about here? These are your relationships with people that you're probably already working with, your vendors and suppliers, maybe your clients, depending upon the industry that you're in. Could be independent contractors or service companies you're working with, and even your landlord. So what do I see happening here? I see that times have changed. We can all agree to that, right? So things have changed. Suppliers have gone out of business. Suppliers have come into business. Supplies themselves have changed. You can't buy a fence to save your life right now because the lumber mills were shut down for too long. So this is, I use the lumber example because I have a client right now who has a product that is selling, she's selling tons of it. And so she negotiated with her supplier to get this product in, some kind of MDF board. And she agreed to buy very large quantities of this. And you know what? She got a very good deal on it. She doesn't have to pay the inflated prices everybody else is paying because she agreed to buy so much of it. And now she's selling it like crazy to people because she actually has it in stock. So what I want you to think about here is think about the negotiations that you have with people or have had with people and how things have changed. You can tweak things sometimes and you can make it work for you when things outside of your control change. And I just want you to be on the lookout for these things. So she's making a boatload off of this lumber because she negotiated a deal that now nobody else can negotiate with the supplier that actually has the stuff because, you know, she's got it tied up. She's getting it into her business. She's making all the money. That was because she had a great relationship with the supplier and she knew what to ask for. And now she's, you know, off the charts. So it's things like even the smallest things like that can make a huge difference. One thing to note is with landlords, and if you are leasing property, commercial property, any property really, keep notice of when your renewal dates are, because you can negotiate your agreements prior to that renewal date. Most people don't know when their renewal date is, when their last day to negotiate is, and they just roll over into the next year or 5-year period or 10-year period, whatever it is. But if you know those dates, you can talk to your landlord and say, hey, you know, the market has changed. I don't want to leave this space, but there's space for so much cheaper right next door. So can we renegotiate what the rates are? Or do I have to talk to the landlord next door? They're going to talk to you, but you have to know those dates. You have to know those times, and you have to know to ask for those things. So I want you to keep your eye out as you pivot, and maybe you're already doing this. Maybe you've done it, and now you need to make some amendments to some of the agreements that you already had in place. But look at those agreements that you have in place and think about how maybe you could tweak them or change them, or, you know, have a good conversation with your supplier, your landlord, your independent contractor, your service provider about, you know, maybe it has to do with money only. Maybe it has to do with terms. Maybe you can pay something down faster than you could before, or maybe you need longer terms. Maybe you need, you know, 90 days instead of 60 days or something like that. But those little things can be a huge difference in your bottom line of your company. So I want you to keep an eye out for those things and make sure that you're noting those as well. And then make sure you're documenting them, because that's going to be important to keeping you safe down the road. So these relationships are critical to the success of a business, which you already know that if you're a business owner. They can drive the growth of the business and ensure that the business meets its revenue goals. Keep an eye out because maybe you can exceed your revenue goals if you play your cards right in this situation. So on the worksheet, we've got the O for others. And I ask, are you negotiating with your vendors, suppliers, independent contractors, or landlord? And some notes here. And that's another thing that is good to bring up with, your attorney or whoever is doing some of these things on your behalf if you have other people helping you. So I'll check in with you, Sarah, and then if not, we can jump to the last one.
Yeah, I do have one question here. So when you're making relationships with these others, your vendors or your contractors, how official does it need to be to have something be something you could, sue someone on? So like if a vendor didn't agree to a term or didn't, provide your supplies on time, do you need to have an attorney involved when you write up an initial contract, or, what would be involved in that process?
So absolutely, you should have an attorney involved. So if you're dealing with an established business, they will probably have some sort of agreement in place already. Might just be a purchase order with some terms and conditions, but it's some sort of agreement that you would be signing off on. And the general rule here is just if you're signing off on something, you probably want to make sure you know what it is you're signing off on. So if you don't understand anything in that, or you're not sure about anything in there, definitely give it to your attorney and have a conversation. And the great thing there is that, any small business attorney like myself, we get that there's different levels. And you kind of mentioned this before, Sarah, there's different levels of business. And if it's just you and you're just starting out and your clients are, just people like you trying to buy your services, for example, then you need something that's very simple and straightforward, because when you present that contract or those terms and conditions to them and they look at it and go, well, what does number 2 mean? If you can't answer them, they're not going to trust you and they're not going to buy from you. Mm-hmm. So they need to be very, very clear and easy for you to explain to them. Now, as you get up into like a larger medium-sized business or a manufacturing business, for example, you might have master contracts, that are 10, 20, 30 pages long that you agree to have all of the terms and conditions spelled out with a certain supplier, for example. And then you have purchase orders that are like amendments to that master agreement for the amount of, supplies that you're buying. Let's say you're buying metal or something. You might have a master agreement in place, and then you just execute these POs to say, hey, I need, 100 pounds of that. And I don't even know what you're ordering, but you get the idea. So when you're starting out, companies in business probably have something already to give to you to look at and sign, and in that situation, have your attorney look at it. But you probably want to have an attorney draft up what you're going to be giving your clients. So you probably need some sort of client agreement or customer agreement. If you're selling online, there's terms and conditions, privacy policies on the website, things like that. So hopefully I answered that for you.
Yeah, great. And I do have another question that just came in. So as you stated, and one of the attendees agreed, contracts can be really complicated with a lot of legalese, right? If the contract is less than $5,000, is there a way to just have a simple contract written up that isn't as involved?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it really has to be suited to your business and what you're doing and who you are. So, I mean, I write agreements for some of my clients that are, for example, I have a client that does senior home care. So she, goes in and helps seniors with different tasks around the house. She needed an agreement that was 1 page, very large font, and very easy to understand because she's dealing with elderly clients and she wants to make it very straightforward and easy for them. So that's what we did. We put together a very straightforward 1 to 2. I think the second page had like the options you could check off, but so I think it was 2 pages, but we made it very simple and very straightforward for her clients. And that's really what you want, because if you're small and you're dealing with, your client, if your client's elderly, for example, in this situation, she knew exactly what she needed the contract to look like. And I helped make sure that we had the legal risks and whatnot covered for her within the constraints that she had. Whereas I have other companies that are dealing with large companies and they have to submit their agreements to these larger companies. So a little one-page agreement that doesn't have any legal wording in it is not going to fly with a big company. They are going to submit it to their legal, and then their legal is going to go, well, where's this and where's that? And da, da, da. So we really tailor it to the size of business that you are and the size of business that you're going to be presenting it to.
That's great. And then I'm not sure if you have an answer to this, but someone, if you don't have an attorney, is there somewhere else you could get a simple contract, or is the best case scenario just getting an attorney for your business?
So you really want to get an attorney for your business, and you want to do it sooner than later. And there are attorneys out there that will work with you. So on like price and startups and whatnot. But I've seen so many businesses come to me when they are starting to be successful in their sales, but they didn't start out with an attorney up front, and they've gotten themselves into trouble. They, maybe their contract was pretty good, but they didn't pay attention to the terms of payment, and they have to wire transfer something, which costs like $20 each time they do it. And they have to do it within 24 hours of receiving something, which it's like, I can't do this. Like, this isn't reasonable for my business, but that's what they agreed to. So that's just one example, but there's a lot of just little things that an attorney is going to help you pick up on and make smart decisions about. And it's going to help you grow faster, because anything that you invest in really making sure that your business is whole and sound and you're making the best decision possible, it just helps propel you forward so much faster. There's all these hiccups that happen along the way if you don't have that kind of smooth foundation or that solid foundation.
All right, great. That's all we have for now.
All right, well, let's get to the T here before we run out of time. T for time. Okay, so T is terms. And what we're talking about here is your entity itself. And I know we had a question a little bit earlier about just entity, and I did mention that there are different types of entities. So different businesses, excuse me, different business needs naturally require different types of entities. And if a business dramatically reinvents itself when pivoting, or if a business is just starting, same considerations, honestly, it will need to reevaluate its business entity. So there's a lot of questions that go into determining what is the best business entity for you. I know these days a lot of people jump right into limited liability companies, and they're, generally speaking, they're really great entities to have. But before you jump in, we want to make sure that it's the right one for you. I just had a client have their accountant or CPA form a Texas entity for them, and they're looking at owning a business in New Jersey. I have no idea why they have a Texas entity. It doesn't make any sense. Now they're gonna have to file in 2 states. It's a mess. So I want you to think about ahead of time, what is going to make the most sense for your business, for what your business does. And I have some things here to consider, and this is not, an inclusive list by any means, but do you plan on having investors? If you eventually want investors, well, most investors want to have stock. They don't want to have membership in an LLC. And if you're really seriously considering investors, then you might want to go ahead and just file right off the bat in Delaware, because every investor loves the Delaware laws. So they would love to invest in a Delaware LLC or a Delaware corporation over anything else. So these are some things we can talk about ahead of time, so you're not wasting time, which is another, maybe goes back to the question that we just had. You could file an LLC with the state when really what you need is a Delaware corporation for your investors, and you just wasted that time. You didn't have to waste that time. You didn't have to waste that money, that energy filing that, if you would have thought through the process to begin with. So that's one thing. How much flexibility do you want as an owner? Limited liability companies are great for flexibility. So if this is a smaller company, if this is a services business, if you're not interested in investors, LLCs might be the way to go. And the great thing about them is that they have different ways that you can allow yourself to be taxed when you're an LLC. And on that note, always tell my clients, I am looking at the entity from the point of view of the attorney, in that I want to make sure that you're protected from personal liability. However, I also need you to talk to your accountant and CPA because they know where you're at with taxes, and they can help us determine if there's a particular entity structure that is going to be taxed in a way that's more beneficial to you. No one likes tax surprises. So that's the piece that we're trying to figure out there. Another question, how important is it for you to be protected from personal liability? You know, if you are a single member LLC, you might not be as protected as if you had multiple members in your LLC, or if you were a corporation. So let's talk about that. Do you have a lot to protect? Do you not have a lot to protect? What does your operational team and structure look like? Has it changed? You know, some people start out with a Pennsylvania LLC that is member managed, which means that the members make all the decisions in the company, but maybe they've grown and maybe now they want, did I say that backwards? Now they want managers to make those decisions and the members to act more like stockholders. They still make important decisions, but to act more like stockholders. So things like that can often change. Do you want to minimize taxes? That's the CPA piece. We want to make sure that we're in the right entity that will work for your tax structure at the time. And these can change. So we do need to talk about them on a regular basis just to make sure you're still in the right entity for you. And what works for one business owner might not be the best fit for another. There are pros and cons to every business entity. It's not one size fits all. And as a business pivots or changes over time, the wrong entity could restrain the company's growth and hinder its success. And of course, we don't want that. So the last question on your sheet is about the terms. Have you reviewed your entity type and tax status with your CPA and attorney? And again, I would just recommend off the bat that everyone do this at least once a year, just to make sure you're in the right entity, that you're filing the right tax status for where you're at in business. And that is pretty much what I have to say. If there's any questions, we'll go through them. But at the bottom of the worksheet, as I say, congratulations, you're ready to talk to your attorney about changes you made during the pandemic. So if you filled this all out, then you know exactly what you need to talk about.
Great. Thank you so much, Janelle. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad everyone, stuck on for the whole time. We had a great turnout, about 70% of the people that registered, which is amazing. Oh, great. Also, Janelle put her information up here, which is awesome. I was just going to say, we will make sure that you have her information in a follow-up email. I did put that in the chat at the beginning, but we do send a follow-up email. It normally goes out within 2 to 4 business days, and it will have a copy of the recording and the handout and the PowerPoint as a PDF, so that you can reference this as you move forward. I do have one question here in the chat. I do encourage everyone, if you have a question, now is the time to put it in the Q&A, because we have, about a little less than 5 minutes left on this webinar. But before I get to this last question, I just want to say thank you, everyone. And I did put a link to our survey in the chat. So if you've attended any of our webinars before, you know that due to our funding from the SBA, we're required to get some feedback on how we did, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see in the future, so that we can continue to provide these high quality trainings to you. It is a 4-question survey, should take you less than a minute. So that is in the chat, and I thank you all in advance for taking that. All right, so we do have this one question here. It's and we'll see what you say, Janelle. Because it's a little related to legal, but it's a little more about business insurance as well. They're asking, what is your advice in regards to how much business insurance is needed if you're a small consulting service business?
So I'll take this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about just kind of the scope of everything that comes into the legal realm of figuring out these business questions. I work with my clients on a quarterly basis. And what we do is we have a strategy session that's included in the quarterly fees. And then all of our conversations after that are included. So you're not worried about being charged, billable minutes. And one of the things that we end up talking a lot about is insurance. And for businesses, there are many types of insurance available out there right now. And different providers have different qualifications and different pieces, and obviously different costs to these different types of insurances. What I've been seeing a lot of is pretty much every business should have some sort of general liability policy. And these are pretty affordable. So they cover kind of the basics of everything. So that is a given for just pretty much any business across the board. In addition to that, if you're a service business and you're providing any kind of consulting, then you probably want some sort of malpractice coverage as well, because you're giving advice and people or your clients are depending or acting upon your advice. So you can swear up and down that, it's on them, the decisions are all theirs, da 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 da. But really what it comes down to is if you recommended something and they followed your recommendations, something goes terribly wrong, they will come back after you. So an insurance isn't meant really to, it's meant to cover any risk. So you want to get enough insurance that it makes sense that it would cover something that happens, but not so much that it's costing too much of your revenues just to keep it covered. So we really look at what is that balance. So for example, I mean, I'm obviously in the legal industry, so I have to have malpractice insurance well, not have to, but need to have malpractice insurance coverage. So what limits do I need though? Do I need 10 million in coverage? Do I need 1 million in coverage? Do I need 500,000 in coverage? Do I need to pay certain deductibles? And that's all conversations that I tend to have with my clients, because we're really looking at what are the risks. What are the risks of doing things? What are the risks of not doing things? And insurance is a piece of that risk conversation, absolutely. So I don't know if I answered that, but those are the two. If you accept credit cards, that's another level of insurance that a lot of my clients have been taking on, just because of that. The credit card companies tend to not help if something gets hacked. So if you have this insurance, you're able to cover yourself if clients' personal data gets taken.
Great. Thanks, Janelle. And yeah, just one last thing I'd want to add to that, because obviously insurance is a whole nother can of worms, right? It's kind of related to legal, but we could probably do a whole hour-long session just on insurance. But since we are doing a lot of webinars on digital transformation currently, I just also want to plug really quickly that if you're doing anything that involves client information online, taking credit cards, et cetera, especially if you're getting ready to build a website or grow your e-commerce business in a pandemic, making sure you're taking a look at cybersecurity and cyber insurance as well. What kind of risks are there in that space? Because I think that's something not a lot of people are very familiar with. And like I said, once again, that's something you can talk to an SBDC consultant about. So with that was all the questions we had today, and it's 11:59, so we're finishing right here on time. If anyone has follow-up questions, you have Janelle's information, you have the SBDC's information, and that's all for today, folks. So thank you so much for joining us. I more than encourage you to look forward to our next session in the legal consideration series, which is happening in May. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.